Detective James Carter had seen his fair share of horrors. 20 years on the force had hardened him to the worst humanity had to offer. But nothing could have prepared him for the case that landed on his desk one cold October morning. It was a file marked "Confidential," with a single word scrawled across the front in bold red letters: Shadows. The case began with a missing person report. A young woman named Clara Bennett had vanished from her apartment in the heart of the city. Her neighbors reported hearing strange noises the night she disappeared: whispers, footsteps, and the sound of something being dragged across the floor. But when the police arrived, they found nothing. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no clues. Just an empty apartment and a lingering sense of dread. Carter flipped through the file, his brow furrowing as he read the details. Clara was a 28-year-old artist, known for her hauntingly beautiful paintings of urban landscapes. Her last known whereabouts were her apartment, where she'd been working on a new piece, a dark abstract painting that her friends described as unsettling. The canvas was still on the easel when the police arrived, but the painting itself was gone. Carter's first stop was Clara's apartment. The building was old, its walls lined with cracks and its floors creaking underfoot. The air inside was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Clara's apartment was on the third floor, a small, cluttered space filled with half-finished paintings and sketchbooks. Carter's eyes were drawn to the easel in the corner. The canvas was blank, but the edges were stained with dark, almost black paint. He ran a finger along the frame, feeling the faintest tremor beneath his touch. It was as if the canvas was alive, pulsing with some unseen energy. He turned to the desk where a stack of Clara's sketchbooks lay. Flipping through them, he found page after page of dark, twisted imagery, shadowy figures, distorted faces, and scenes of urban decay. But one sketch stood out: a detailed drawing of a man in a long coat, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Beneath the figure, Clara had written a single word: Watcher. Watcher. Carter spent the next few days digging into Clara's life, searching for any connection to the mysterious Watcher. He interviewed her friends, her co-workers, even her ex-boyfriend, but no one had ever heard her mention the name. The only lead was a cryptic note found in her journal. He's always there, in the corners of my vision. I can feel him watching me, even when I'm alone. As Carter delved deeper, he began to notice something strange. Everywhere he went, he felt like he was being watched. It started as a faint prickling sensation on the back of his neck, but soon grew into an overwhelming sense of dread. He'd catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of his eye, a shadow darting across a wall, a figure standing in the distance. But when he turned to look, there was never anything there. A week into the investigation, another person vanished. This time, it was a man named Daniel Harris, a journalist who'd been working on a story about Clara's disappearance. Like Clara, Daniel had left behind no trace, just an empty apartment and a single clue: a photograph of Clara's painting, torn in half and left on his desk. Carter examined the photograph closely. The painting was even more unsettling than he'd imagined: a chaotic swirl of dark colors, with faint, almost imperceptible figures lurking in the background. One figure stood out: a man in a long coat and wide-brimmed hat, his face hidden in shadow. The Watcher. Carter's investigation led him to an old, abandoned church on the outskirts of the city. The building was crumbling, its walls covered in graffiti and its windows shattered. Inside, he found evidence of recent activity: candles, strange symbols drawn on the floor, and a large blackened circle in the center of the room. In the basement, he discovered a hidden room filled with paintings, dozens of them, all depicting the same dark, twisted imagery as Clara's work. And in the center of the room, on a makeshift altar, was a single canvas, Clara's missing painting. As Carter approached the painting, he felt a sudden overwhelming sense of unease. The figures in the painting seemed to shift and move, their eyes following him as he stepped closer. And then he saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible figure, standing in the corner of the room, just outside the frame. The Watcher. Carter knew he was running out of time. The Watcher was real, and it was coming for him. He spent the next few days gathering everything he could find on the case. Photos, notes, even the torn photograph from Daniel's apartment. He pored over the evidence, searching for a pattern, a clue, anything that could lead him to the truth. And then he found it. Hidden in the corner of one of Clara's sketches was a series of numbers, coordinates. Carter followed them to an old abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. Inside, he found Clara and Daniel, alive but barely conscious, their bodies covered in strange blackened marks. But the Watcher was there too, waiting in the shadows. Carter could feel its presence, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to seep into his very soul. He drew his gun, his hands trembling as he aimed it at the figure in the corner. "Show yourself," he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty warehouse. The Watcher stepped into the light, its face still hidden beneath the wide-brimmed hat. It moved with an unnatural grace, its long coat billowing behind it like a shadow come to life. Carter fired, but the bullets passed through the figure as if it were made of smoke. And then it was on him, its cold, skeletal hands wrapping around his throat. Carter fought back, but it was no use. The Watcher was too strong, its grip like iron. As the darkness closed in around him, Carter realized the truth. The Watcher wasn't a man. It was something far older, far darker, and far more dangerous. Carter woke up in the hospital, his throat bruised and his body weak. Clara and Daniel were there too, both recovering from their ordeal. The police had found them in the warehouse, but there was no sign of the Watcher. No evidence, no clues, nothing. Carter knew the truth, though. The Watcher was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And as he lay in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him still. The case was closed, but for Carter, it would never be over. The Watcher was real, and it would always be there, in the corners of his vision, waiting for the right moment to strike.